I've brought you here into this woodland to show you some of the nature principles, the wisdom of nature applied right here. And this is where the founders of permaculture, Bill Mollison and David Holmgren, learned and studied this ecology and this woodland system and realised how productive and how healthy it is. And comparing that with how most of our human growing systems happen, they could see that actually there's a lot to learn from nature. And so they actually studied and looked at what the principles are at work here that we can then take into our human designs to make them more sustainable, more regenerative. So I'm going to talk you through some of what we can see here. A first principle that you may notice is that compared with a garden, there are many layers of vegetation in place. So if we start from the bottom on the forest floor here, we've got below the ground a whole network of mycelium and roots, so mycelium being the body, physical body of the fungi and the toadstools and the mushrooms that are just the fruiting bodies that you might see. And all that mycelium network connects the different roots together. And all these plants here have roots at different levels below the ground as well. And then if we come to above the ground, we've got the earth covered here with a thin layer of ground covers, and there are mosses and just really small plants that are just covering the initial soil. And then we're going up a little bit, we've got green plants like these grasses and sedges, and we've got other taller green plants, soft green plants that are that next layer. And then it goes up into the shrubby layer. So we've got this woody, shrubby, gorse plant. And then up a little bit again, we've got small trees, and then it goes right up into the canopy trees, the really tall ones that create a shaded environment and habitat for the ones that are below. And then a seventh layer is about the climbing plants that grow through any of these layers. So altogether we've got about 7 layers that we've identified that are growing here at the same time. And they all occupy different places. And so what that shows also is the concept of niche, that each of these different plants and different animals and insects that live here have a place within this ecosystem that is where they particularly thrive. And it might be the more moist and shady part, or it might be the squirrels that live in the tops of the trees. So each organism will have its perfect environment. And so we can take that idea of niche and think about, when we think about in our design where we want to put something or how we want to fulfill a function, that we do that in a way where the optimal conditions are there for that. And so this layering also, we can apply that in our garden and in our forest designs by creating, for example, forest gardens, where we make sure that we occupy all those layers so that we have a 3D design, as opposed to maybe in a garden just a lawn, which would be just the one layer. And we can then choose plants that are useful for us in terms of food and nutrition and many other functions, medicinal or dyeing plants or fodder plants for animals. So bringing in all those multiple functions of these plants that we choose, so that we meet the human needs that we have in a really abundant way. I want to talk a little bit about the interrelationship between all these organisms. So we've got these different layers of plants, and each of those has different qualities and characteristics, and will therefore provide either food or habitat or other materials to make homes from, nesting material for other organisms that live within this forest. So a lot of permaculture thinking is about the relationships between things, and where possible we want to create beneficial relationships. So always thinking about conscious collaboration where we can, and creating an abundant network that overall fulfills the functions that we're needing to meet as humans, to meet our needs in a really sustainable way. So we've got layering. You can see here also that idea about the soil, the the soil being alive and the way that it's always covered. So if there's an animal that might dig a hole or a tree falls over, the soil will nature will want to get it covered. So there's the idea of how soil feeds itself in nature. And then there's also the principle of succession, which is when an area of bare soil is created in some way, that nature will, as quickly as possible, want to cover that up again. So quite quickly you'll find small plants and mosses and plants that set seed really quickly to colonize that soil, to cover it and protect it. And once that's established, then the next bigger plants will come in, and that some of the shrubs will drop some seeds in, and eventually it will go back to forest. And this is a really important understanding in nature, that succession is a natural force, that in our human systems, when we were to leave an area of land alone, that it will naturally regenerate and plants will come in and birds will drop them, and eventually it will want to grow a forest. And so when we just have lawns, that one crop, what we're trying to do as humans is putting a lot of effort and work into stopping succession by mowing, putting fuel in to put these machines. They create a lot of noise to maintain an unstable system. And what it wants to do is grow.